Hi. Every so often a new method comes along when you teach courses. I teach entrepreneurship in this case. And in this case, the book that came along was The 4 Steps to the Epiphany by Steve Blank. Now what this is a bundling of course notes of Steve Blank when he taught at Haas Business School. Later on he sold this cafe press by himself, and then a friend recommended to him that he post it on Amazon, and then it became a real success story. So that's how I got to know of it. Since then he's been teaching it at Stanford University, and he calls the course no longer by its previous name, but he calls it the Lean Launchpad. But the real method that is described in here is not called the Lean Launchpad, it's called customer development. So for me, when I read this book, it was very interesting because it touched on a lot of things that I'm familiar with, and I thought it could really add value to our course. Let me explain. My background is in industrial design engineering. I studied at Delft University of Technology. And in design, one of the things that you do is you always start with the user. So we go to users, we talk to them about their problems and solutions, and what they would like and what they don't like. But what we do is we really look at them. So we don't come with a vision, we just look at what they're doing, and then in that context, we ourselves try to be creative and come up with some sort of solution. Now, Steve Blank does the same thing. He also goes to users, but there's one big difference. He says that what you should do in a new venture is you should actually go and test whether your vision for this new venture will actually hold up. So rather than asking users to give you a vision, you have a vision. And the problem with many startups is that they never test that vision. They develop the vision all the way to the end. They launch a product and then it flops, it fails. And meanwhile, they've burned a lot of cash. They've ruined the investments of people who put money in their venture. So instead, what Steve says is, we should have a lean startup. This, by the way, is a term of his student. It's called Eric Ries. He came up with the term lean startup. What we should do is we should remove risks along the way and not wait for the risk to end up in the end and turn out to be so disastrous that the venture fails. The kind of risks you have in a venture are either technological risks, which you can deal with more inside the company, feasibility studies, etc. And then there are user risks. Will the user have this need? Will they accept our solution? Will they pay the amount of money we think they will pay for this solution? Those are user risks. And we tend to only test them when the product is being developed and put on the market, perhaps in a beta version. Instead, what he says, we should test those user risks much earlier. And so that's really the new thing about Steve Blank. The way he says you should test these things is by, and that's really refreshing, by the way, is not by going to users. I mean, many people do that all the time. It is by formulating a hypothesis about your assumption. So something that will be falsified. Because what typically happens is, you go to your user with your vision, and then the user says, yeah, that doesn't really work, but that works. So you come back saying, oh, well, you know, I was half right. Instead, what Steve Blank says, you should come up with a falsifiable solution. 8 out of the 10 users have this particular need. Then you go to your users. And then you will actually be confronted with the fact that maybe only 6 out of the 10 had that need. And your hypothesis is falsified. So, if it's falsified, you're confronted with the reality that your assumption was wrong. And that's often missing in a classroom setting. Now maybe just why I really liked it. You see, in the old days, if you were an entrepreneur, you were in interaction with these users. So you knew about their problems, and you were creative while you were interacting with them. There was really never a problem. You were in touch with user needs. But over time in academia, we've segregated courses about entrepreneurship from the users that are going to use the products that come out of these courses. And so the courses themselves have become islands in which there's a lot of analytical thinking happening, but very little testing of everything that the students come up with. And so what Steve Blank reintroduces is the notion, wait a minute, a lot of the stuff that's happening in the course are basically assumptions. And so we should go out and test them. And we should do that rigorously so that people are actually confronted with whether it works or not. So the method is known for, and the method is actually called customer development, although it's often known by the name Lean Startup, the name he gave to the course associated with it. But the method customer development is really known for various things. First, that it focuses on testing assumptions, which we discussed. I think that's a real valuable contribution of the method. Second, it focuses on users. Now that's not new, but it kind of reintroduces that back into entrepreneurship. In design thinking we have that, in lead user research we have that, so that's really not new, but part of the method. The third element is that it is focused on being lean, that we don't waste money, that we build these huge ventures that flop at the end. So that's really the third component, that we try to test things early on and use as little money as we can to maximize the efficiency in learning. And that leads to the fourth component, which is a minimal viable product. You know, many designers, I'm a designer by background, and many business students, and many product engineers for that matter, all have this notion that you want to give the customer something that they would love. So there's this understanding we've got to build this perfect product. And if you read the biography of Steve Jobs, Isaacson actually claims that's one of the dogmas of Apple, is to build for perfection, push for perfection. And that's exactly what Steve Blank says you shouldn't do. So it's kind of counterintuitive there. Because he says, if you build for perfection, you're putting lots of resources and time in that. And it may actually flop, that perfection. People may not even be waiting for perfection. In fact, there are particular kinds of users, which he calls early evangelists, which is the same as von Hippel's lead users. There are some users that have such a high need that they'll be willing to put up with a product that's not perfect. Now, if you can sell a product to them, then you've proven to yourself that later on you can sell a more perfect product to a larger market. So let's not waste time going to this perfect product. Let's first see if we can help these people that have a huge need and are willing to put up with a lesser kind of product, a less perfect product. And if you can do that, you've kind of proven your business model. And so what he says you should do is you should sell what he calls a minimal viable product to early evangelists. Because if they will buy into it, then you've proven to yourself, you know, there's a product market fit for this product later on. The method is especially good in newly emerging industries, when there's new products that change the rules of the industry. There's no comparables out there yet. People are happy that at least someone's coming to the market with a solution. And so they'll be willing to put up with a minimal viable product. They'll respect you for trying to come up with a solution that addresses their need that no one has addressed before. But when you're entering a market where there's a huge amount of products available, people have high expectations. They don't want a minimal viable product anymore. They want a product that exceeds the previous product. And so in those circumstances, the MVP or minimal viable product won't work as well either. So what's the value of the method? Well, especially in areas where there is no solution yet, or very minimal solutions, people are waiting for someone to help them, and they're willing to put up with products that are not perfect. And it's a good method because it allows our students to leave the island, as what Steve Blank calls it, get out of the building and get in touch with the actual users. And so that's the value of the method. It confronts students with reality. But I think a very important part of it is that students must first have a vision. If you don't have a vision, you're just going to customers and going along with whatever they say. So in our course, we want to stress that it's very important that students have a plan A. They must have a vision. Fundamentally, creativity comes from the human mind and not from users that are going to tell it to you. You yourself have to come up with this vision for your venture.